Hey, folks, and welcome to the Techs in the City podcast. We're super excited to have you today. My name is Daniel Walters. I'm part of the crew who puts together Techs in the City. The other half of that crew, or part of that crew, I should say, is my buddy Chase Morrow here. Chase, how are you doing today?
I think you're much more than half because it could never be pulled off without you, Daniel. So, yeah, you're probably above half for sure.
You're really nice.
Yeah.
You just make it so that I can get on like a chair and shout at everybody about
But you're
once
so
a
damn
quarter.
good at it.
I am. I
You're
do. I
really
do
good.
have a pretty loud voice. So, anyway, Techs in the City. If you guys have attended some of the events and everything like that, it is part of Deploy Alloy, which is Chase's company. And Chase, kind of tell me a little bit about like Deploy Alloy and and your philosophies and like how Techs in the City kind of came about.
Sure, I will. So, Deploy Alloy, we build custom software, do some talent, staff augmentation type stuff, and we've got a fractional division where people come to us for fractional C-level folks or fractional developers, and my business partners are Intermark and Alloy Digital, and we all believe in this creating a community for the greater good of our community, there where people share knowledge, job openings, code, anything that makes someone better at what they do and makes the community better is what we believe in. Techs in the City is a huge part of that, right? Creating these events where everybody comes and there's no selling. You come in and you have great speakers like Darren who know a lot about technology, and you leave and you've learned something.
That's freaking awesome. And like, the events, I think we've put it together, 5 events now?
So this will be number 6 coming up in December. That's
Gotcha.
correct. We've had
Yeah.
5. Yes.
The thing that I like about the events is like they're hugely technical focused and like it's a variety of topics, which has been great. We've been really fortunate with the attendance. So we have the events once a quarter at Workplay Theater in downtown Birmingham. And I think we've averaged over 200 people per event, and Workplay only holds about 250. So it's been absolutely fabulous to have such a full room of just highly technical talent.
Yeah, so every one that we've had, we've sold out. Well, we don't sell them; it's free, but we cut the tickets off at $250, and we do that for a reason, right? But I'm confident if we raised it to 400, we could probably get 400 people to come. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, where else are you going to go? One of them, and I know you guys remember this, we had 4 CEOs around town on stage doing a rap battle, right?
Yes, we did.
4 of the most introverted nerds that you've ever met.
That was the second best.
It was epic. It was totally epic. So there's a lot of fun to be had in it as well.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, our next one is at Workplay December 10th. That's a Tuesday evening from about 5 until 8 or so. Or sorry, 5:30 until 8 or so. 5:30 is when we're going to have some networking for about an hour, and then we'll get the show started about 6.
Don't forget
6:30.
free beer and pizza, too.
Free beer and pizza.
Yeah.
So make sure that you come. What was the topic again, Chase?
So this one is going to be fucking great, man. It's called Agile Microdosing, and a good friend of mine, Jeff Talley, he's one of the smartest software architects around in Birmingham. Darren knows him as well and can vouch for that, but he's come up with this concept. I'm not going to give too much of it away, that Agile is just not Agile anymore. So we've got him and another really smart guy in town, Chris Sims, who knows Agile probably better than anyone I know.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a little bit of a debate and a battle about which one is the correct way to build software.
Well, and if I'm not badly mistaken, and Chris, you can correct me on stage. Chris was one of 17 people who studied under the gentleman who
original
like
founders
the
of
original
Agile.
founders
Yeah,
of
right.
Agile or something
Yeah.
like that. So like he knows Agile, and we're gonna have our buddy Donald Smith moderating. Correct?
Donald Smith will be moderating, and he's a phenomenal individual and part of this community as well. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, so don't miss it.
Well, and speaking of fun, like we've got a few other things planned for the future of Techs in the City. Obviously, we're starting this podcast, but Chase and I vision like it's much larger than just a podcast. To make sure that we're again highlighting and celebrating the tech talent in the cities.
That's right.
That
So,
we are going to be at. So why don't you elaborate?
We will be hitting my hometown of Huntsville, Alabama on I believe it's January the 14th. We're working with the great group up there, Generator, and then Max Grolier is a friend of mine up in Huntsville that's really doing some great things in the area that they call Mid-City. So that's where we're going to have it at one of the properties they own. It's called The Camp. It's going to be fantastic. Huntsville is certainly a tech town and certainly holds a dear place in my heart as well since I grew up there. But and then after that, my business partner, Matt McKenzie, will be. We're looking at February to do one in Atlanta as well. So
both of those are going to be a blast. We've already been kind of talking about. I don't think we're ready to announce it yet, but we've been talking about the topic for the Huntsville one, and I think it's going to raise a couple eyebrows. It's going to be a ton of fun, and then future casting a little bit. We're giving you guys a year notice. But tell me what we're planning on doing probably November, December of 2025.
Yeah, so part of Deploy's philosophy and Techs in the City's philosophy and why we exist, right, is to do good work and deliver great work. But it's much bigger than that, right? There's a true reason behind it, and it really is to get all these developers or techies in these cities and pat them on the back and tell them how fucking amazing they are because I've seen it myself. I've run software companies, and they just don't get told enough how great they are. I mean, everything we do runs on software. We couldn't do any of this right now if we didn't have software. So somebody builds all of this. And when do you think the last time a help desk person got a phone call that said, "Hey, you've done a great job today," right? They're just being screamed at all day most of the time. Now I know Darren works for Alloy Digital now, who are dear people. And so I know he does get told that he does a great job because I've seen it. I've heard it. Matt and Cody and Andrew and their team do a great job of patting their software people on the back. There's no problem. But the fact is, a lot of folks don't.
No.
The majority of the time, they don't. So we want to host an event. It's kind of like the Grammys or the awards, right? We want to, in each one of these cities, roll out the red carpet, man. Come in a tuxedo, come in your underwear, come in a T-shirt. We don't care. It's just dress like you want to be. Come be who you are. And we're going to celebrate the best tech minds in each city and give them some awards and pat them on the back. Tell them how great they are.
I know I'm super stoked for all of this that we're going to be bringing out to you guys. So please, come participate and enjoy, have some fun and everything.
But real quick, I probably wouldn't come in your underwear if I were you. I don't know. You might get arrested. But T-shirts and tuxedos.
I mean, depends on what the underwear is.
It could be.
I mean, it could be some cool, Deploy underwear. I don't know.
Who knows?
Sorry, that came from those cool Deploy shoes that you have.
Oh, dude, Matt McKenzie knocked it out of the park.
Oh, that was absolutely amazing.
I wish I had them here, but I don't.
So, focusing back in on the podcast, part of the reason why we wanted to start the podcast, again, celebrate and highlight the cool people in tech, their stories, and the things that they're working on, things that they're doing that are just really interesting, and not be afraid to kind of get in the weeds of those things. And that's where our first guest right over here comes in, Darren Jennings. He is the principal engineer for Alloy Digital. Darren, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing really well.
Appreciate you being here today.
One little correction. I'm one of the principal engineers.
My apologies. One of the principal engineers.
We got some great folks there.
Yeah,
so
it is
make sure I don't
great team.
Don't step out of turn there.
Yeah. And I'll go to say something before Darren gets started. Darren and I go way back. We've known each other over 20 years. Darren was the first placement on the Fetch platform that I built back in 2015. My good friend Chris Chatina got matched up with Darren. He spent some time out at a really cool place here in town called Blocks. So Darren and I have got a long history, and he's one of those that I've got a lot of love for, man, and I appreciate our friendship. I've seen the code that you write, and you're an amazing human being, and you're an amazing architect. So
thanks.
Yes,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I have not known Darren for that long, but Darren and I, our paths keep crossing. But anybody who knows me, I'm always bouncing around and doing things. So I'm super excited to kind of be able to sit down with you for a few minutes and kind of get to know you a little bit, what's your history and everything like that. So, tell me a little bit about yourself, Darren.
Sure. I said I'm the old man in the development group just about everywhere I go these days, and it sneaks up on you. One of these days you're a young developer, and the next thing you know you're 55 and wondering why you're still coding. And that's a whole other story we need to get to before the end of this podcast. But no, I've led interesting life, man. I left high school. All I ever wanted to do was be in the military. I joined the military, was on submarines for years, a nuclear engineer on a submarine. Did that for several years, enjoyed it. Then they decided I had asthma and I couldn't be on submarines anymore.
What?
So suddenly, within a week, I'm out of the Navy, no job prospect anywhere. So I just took a job. My uncle called and said, "Hey, you're pretty technical. Why don't you just come write tech manuals for me?" So I started being a tech writer, until I could figure out what I wanted to do. And his brother came in and he said, "I've been watching you write these manuals and you're doing some automation on it." He said, "You need to be a developer." He said, "You think like one. I've known you for years. I know your mind. You need to do it." I said, "Well, yeah, it sounds fun, maybe." And so he came back the next day and sat down a box of Visual Basic 2.0, sat it on my desk and said, "I'm going to be back in a week. I want you to build me something." I said, "Well, what?" He said, "Anything. Just build something and show me what you can do in a week." I said, "No, okay." Well, it turns out he was a program manager at IBM. He was the lead program manager on the RS-6000, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
Mini mainframe.
Yeah.
So he extremely technical, knows a lot of developers. So he knew my mindset before I did. And he created a monster. I mean, the only thing I wanted to do after that was code. And I'm still to this day, I don't want to be a manager, never have. I want to code. And
See, you said something that's interesting. You used the term "he knew my mindset." So
yes,
dig a little deeper into that, Darren. Like when you do a lot of hiring of coders. What is the mindset you're looking for when, be it an entry level or a senior level person?
Honestly, I want an explorer.
Yeah,
I want someone who's not afraid to push buttons and see what this button does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's with my kids. I've encouraged every one of them when they first sat down at a PC. I'm like, I can fix anything that breaks on it, within reason. I'm not going to give them my best PC. I'm going to give them an old one anyway. I can rebuild it and reformat it, but get in there, play with it, click it. If you don't know what it does, try it out. Don't be afraid. Click the wheels. Especially in the days when we have source code, Git repository out there. You've got every commit ever made. You can roll it back. Try it. Learn what it does, and then be that eager learner is what I look for. And
so you hear that, the explorer mindset. That's
I
what
look
Darren
for an
looks for.
explorer mindset.
That's fantastic.
That's a great way of It's a great way of putting it. Just like getting out there and the way I think about it is like getting out there and breaking things.
Yes.
And seeing, break it apart, see how it works, try and put it back together. And just like you said, you can roll it back. It's not that big of a deal. So
exactly.
So you built. Do you remember what you actually built in Visual Basic?
I built a little Explorer panel that had like a file system on the left, and at the time I worked for a poultry supply company that, and I mimicked something that could be a product for them, and it was basically the top node was your farm, the next was each of your, animal classifications, next was like the growing house, and then here's the controllers that are in that house, make it, feed, water, whatever. Well, about 6 months later, they said, "Why don't you just go ahead and try to build it?" And so myself and my cousin, who was the engineer there, sat down and wrote a protocol, an 8-bit protocol that would talk back and forth across an RS-45 network, a 2,000-foot long cable, that would talk to our controllers. And so we spent like a month writing a protocol that would work. And then we built that system. It took about a year of me by myself, never having done it before. Yeah. But we could manage 256 poultry houses from your home. Oh, and we did it actually with dial-up.
What year was this?
Oh, this is in 98, 99.
Oh, my gosh.
But we because of the cable was a limitation. It had to have RS-45 cable.
Yep.
So we did it with we put a phone in the poultry house and had a modem to it and a PC out in the farm, close, like within 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
And then we would dial up to it. And I don't remember the software that you could dial up at the time, where I could dial a specific and connect the two computers and network them together. And then, I found a little library that would let me play alerts, so it would actually dial out and call you if there was like a temperature was too high in one house. Because temperature gets too high in a poultry house, you lose 40,000 birds.
Absolutely,
that can sink you.
Yeah.
So hey, and we had a lady in the place record temperature high alarm, and
go open.
She had
the
to
windows.
record all the numbers from like 65 to 98. And we would, if it was over the set points that they had set for that day, it would call and tell you until somebody acknowledged it and went.
That's an important thing. It was doing alerts really, until somebody acknowledges things.
And the beauty is they gave me free rein to really design this thing. Just because I had some good ideas at the start, and I tried a bunch of things that never made it in. And I tried some things that did, and eventually they sold several of them. In fact, the Australian government, I think, owns all the poultry houses in Australia. And so they actually were in the talks to buy it when I left the company. So I don't know if they bought, I don't know if they ever bought it and installed it, but they were talking about putting it in every poultry farm in Australia.
Wow, your code
so
in every
that was potential at the time. I don't know that it ever happened.
Your code coming from a man who had never
coded a thing before in his life.
That's
and
amazing.
I would be kind of scared to trust my business to it today. But I think that's somebody said on Twitter the other day, you want to fight with a younger version of yourself, be a software developer.
That's great. That's great.
So you left that organization, you moved on, you continued on. What are some of the things that you've done since then?
When I left there is when I actually met Chase in 2000, well, 99. I think you were at or just left Scan Optics.
That's right.
In town. And I came down there. It was my first job in Birmingham. Hey, I'm coming down here. And we wrote scanning solutions. And I thought I was going to be working on a team of developers. That was going to be exciting to finally work with people. And they sent me off to Wisconsin to a project that was in deep trouble. And I was by myself on software that no one else knew. It was written by a developer kind of like me who had written the system, and there was no documentation for it. So I had to figure out what it did and make that work. And I was able to fix it. It was trying to fix a Y2K problem in it. But I had to, that was for, I think it was scanning their unemployment checks or something. Okay. So scanning and processing those. So I left and did that. I've taken a broad path. I mean, when I first started developing, I said I wanted to work for Microsoft. You know, I've had a 10-year goal. In 10 years, I'm going to work for Microsoft. Now, I don't have a degree, and so that was going to be the real challenge. So I had to get, I thought if I can't get a degree, I can get certified. So I can get all the Microsoft certifications I can possibly squeeze in. So I did about 10 of them. I did a lot. I don't remember the exact number, but I took all the ones I thought I could take and ran with them. And within 3 months of my 10th year, since making that commitment to myself, I got the job with Microsoft.
That's amazing.
And I worked there for about 6 years.
Is that something you do often? Like, set those long goals, or was that the first time that you do it? Have you done it since?
That was probably the second time I did it. Okay. I really don't have. I'm not a goal setter. I'm not a planner.
Gotcha.
My wife will complain about that. Actually, she doesn't. She's not a planner either. We really fly by the seat of our pants, but I'm pretty spatially aware. I understand everything I've got going on, and I can see what's close enough. I'll go.
Though.
And it's the way I've operated best. I mean, you give me a deadline, I will take it the most serious I can to try to hit your deadline. As long as two of them don't have deadlines on the same day, that's when I get myself in trouble, and I have to start planning.
Yep.
So you said something, Darren, that's interesting to me, and I can certainly tell. I think y'all both know how I feel about the degrees. I think they're fairly worthless 90% of the time. Not knocking going to college, I certainly went, but I can tell you I graduated with a pre-law degree, and I've never used my degree and since I graduated. But I heard you say you didn't have a degree. You've become one of the best developers that I know, certainly one of the best developers in the Southeast by hands down. What are your feelings on coding and needing a degree or not needing a degree?
I have 5 kids, and I'm not encouraging any of them to go to college. I'm not trying to keep them from doing it.
Yeah.
But I am encouraging them daily to keep learning.
Yeah.
I've taught them at like 3rd grade when they started saying, I'm not really learning anything at school. I already know it because they did.
They did.
And I was like, look, kids, they're not in charge of your education. You're in charge of your education.
Yeah.
I said, y'all see me every night. I've got my laptop open. I'm not playing on the computer. I'm not doing games. I'm reading and studying and finding new things, looking at the new things in technology, seeing if I can get my hands on it. So I'm trying to learn things as I go. And 3 of my 5 kids have picked up on that and are really diving in.
Nice.
The other 2 I have hope for.
It's gotten better, right? Being in the staff aug, HR tech space in Birmingham for 30 years, all right? But it's gotten better. It has. But you still see some of these companies that say mandatory college degree for a software developer. I'm like, oh, my gosh.
What's funny is when I got my job at Microsoft, I interviewed 3 months earlier. And they said, it was in the job description. It was a mandatory degree, so you didn't get this job. He called me back a week later. He said, we're trying to amend the job description.
Yeah, good. Yep.
And so 3 months later, I got the call and said, hey, would you interested in interviewing again?
We dropped the requirement.
Yeah, they would drop that requirement, and we want to hire you. So,
And especially nowadays when knowledge is just so accessible,
Exactly.
it kind of feels like, that college degree requirement, puts, knowledge behind a paywall to be able to, move forward, and finding a bigger and better job and things like that. And, with the advent of the internet, YouTube, and Google, like between those three things alone, it is totally accessible.
and I believe it was MIT. It was either MIT or Stanford. It may have been both. Put their entire curriculum on iTunes a few years ago.
Yes.
And
yes.
I took basically 3 years sitting around at night and taking up all those courses I could.
Yep.
Well, think about
just
it
because
too.
it was interesting, and they were doing things like, hey, we're doing iPhone development right when the iPhone came out. So I'm like, hey, this is the best possible introduction I could get. So,
Well, and think about all of some really good, some really bad, but all of the boot camps that have popped up.
Yes.
Darren, you're wearing a TrueCoders t-shirt. Some dear friends of mine who are great technical folks around town, Oakman and Dean, launched that company a while ago, and they're cranking out some really good developers, right? I think it's an 8-week class, I believe, right? And they're not teaching you just how to build an HTML web page. They're teaching you literally how to code.
and
hence the word TrueCoders.
we're actually working with them on a project right
That's
now.
right. That's right.
awesome.
We are.
So-
Are you allowed to talk about the project?
I assume so.
Sure. You
Okay.
can,
Chase is
yeah,
here.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're actually building a Text in the City website
Oh,
with TrueCoders.
Yeah, it's going to be
So-
really cool. It's going to be Darren's kind of running the mentoring. We have this mentality at Deploy that we've started. It's this train, mentor, deploy, right? So you got training from TrueCoders. They come to Alloy Digital and deploy. Alloy Digital puts some senior programmers over them. We work on some projects with them, get them some really more hands-on development skills with geniuses like Darren's, training them and mentoring them, and then we're able to go deploy them out and let them get their first job. Right?
Well, and I think that's one piece that you guys are doing that's really, really important. Having that hands-on experience. Because, like, you can sit in a classroom, you can watch a YouTube video and everything like that, but until you actually get in there and break things, get in there and explore, you're not going to really learn any of that. How is that going, with some of those newer developers? Are they adopting that mindset?
I've only worked with one so far.
Okay.
And it was a good experience, a very good experience. It
Ask
was
us-
kind of shell-shocked at the beginning. It's like, I said, try it out,
Well,
I
they've
want
got,
you to try
they've got a hard
and-
deadline.
Yeah.
So it's to be finished by the next Text in the City on December the 10th. And
Yeah.
we also want to build in a place in the Text in the City website that houses all of the things going on in tech in the city of Birmingham. So you'll have one place to go to figure out where all the events of tech are happening, because it's a little frustrating on my part, right? Sometimes I'll just miss something.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly in tune what's going on in the tech scene, right? But I'll see something, I'm like, oh man, how did I miss that? Because there's just not one place to go to where we can house everybody's tech
Everything,
events.
everything.
And so that'll be built into the site as well. So
That'll be amazing.
Gonna be
That'll
exciting.
amazing. So let me ask you another question. As far as things you've worked on over your career, what was one of your most favorite things to work on, and what is one of the things that, like, I will never work on something
I
like
think
that
I know
again?
the latter one, but
Do you want to start with the latter one?
I'm gonna let him start
No,
whatever he wants.
I think my least favorite project I ever had was one of my favorites for the first part. We were building the UI for a embedded device. It was actually a digital streamer.
Oh, wow.
It's for a company in Huntsville
Up in
to make a little
Huntsville,
streaming
yeah.
device, and it ran on a little embedded computer inside there. I think it was actually a Raspberry Pi in there. But we wrote the UI for it to control all the the mixing capabilities, switching the audio, etc. And it was a great UI, beautiful UI designed by Terry, the guy that worked with us.
Terry
Chase put us
Gamble.
on.
Terry
Yes,
Gamble, yeah.
great job.
Phenomenal guy.
Great job. And we built it and it worked great. And then the client, we handed it over to the client and they said, now how does it talk to our device? I was like, y'all told me I was building the website, not the interaction and talking with the embedded device. Y'all were writing the server side of this thing. I'm outputting static HTML. So I worked for 6 weeks basically with no pay.
Oh, man.
That's
got that
exactly
built.
the one I knew. he
And
was
I got
gonna
it
pick.
built. I got it built, and I was thinking, how do I recoup that cost? So I got hired up there.
Yeah.
Hey, somebody's got to maintain this thing, right?
That's exactly
There you
right.
And
go.
so I worked as not as slow. I didn't work slower than normal, but I didn't work fast.
You didn't
Until
bend
I had
over
recouped the
backwards.
cost. Yes, until I had recouped that in time, you know.
Darren and I worked together on that project, so I was very confident that's the one he was going to pick.
That's the one. That's the one.
So what about the best one?
The best one, oh man,
Or your favorite one?
the favorite one was Chase mentioned earlier, blocks. It's actually one that they abandoned eventually, but it was a very, very cool application we had written. I had a guy from Huntsville, that was leading our team at the time, and he would challenge us, man. He would come in and say, "Hey, you think if you can have this done by Monday, I'll put a $100 bill in each of your pockets." And we would be like Thursday afternoon going, "I've never even looked at that technology. We'll see if we can do it." And we would rip and replace the database out from under it. So it was in a SQL Server database, and I replaced it with Couchbase, which is a big JSON, whole different query language, everything about it. And got it done. And suddenly we now had flexible schema, which was perfect for the thing. Now, once we had that, it was basically... They manufacture buildings, right? But they manufacture them in chunks.
Right.
So you see the big trailers going down the street. These are big square, white-wrapped boxes. And
if you haven't been out there, you
site.
should, because it's what Jatina's pulling off out there.
It's
is
really amazing.
It's amazing.
And they were building clinics for Walmart. And so they would stand up. They would sit 20 trucks out with these modules, and they just sit them in place. And they could have the thing dried in within a few days out there on site.
crazy.
And it was unreal.
It's nuts.
But all the construction was done in the factory. It was nice and dry. There were big, solid chunk metal pieces, so it wasn't like it was a trailer. I mean, it was a real, composite thing. And we had to manage the supply side of that. So we were building bombs, building materials, trying to figure out the differences between these various units they were building. Like we had bathroom units, and we had what are called Ubers, where they snap all these things together, and each one of them had different build materials. And if you ran out of materials, hey, you just threw the project in a tailspin. So we didn't have an ERP at the time,
Right.
and so we built this thing that actually let the artist or the architects writing the plans for them. They're not drawing out the receptacles and everything else in the plans. They don't have time to do that in the grand scheme. But the electricians on the line know, hey, when I put that little box that they've got on here, I've got to have 3 of these little washers. I've got to have 2, Connex connectors. I've got to have some,
So all the little
8
detailed
screws. They would come in
inventory stuff.
and they'd be able to click on the model, and it was a model in can't even remember the Revit. They'd click on the Revit model and say, and I would pop a dialog and it'd say, oh, this is really this, and here's a list of all the parts that we had. And they would select this part's going to be 3 of these, 4 of these. There's 6 of these, but they're consumed. And so they'd be able to tell this, and we would be able to build the bill of materials and go. That project worked great until we realized that the project that they started us on was a brand new prototype that had never been done before. Had we started on an existing product that we had built and had stabilized, it would have been great. But these drawings were getting revised
Constantly.
daily, weekly. And so if the designer had cut and pasted, everything got new IDs, so you had to restitch. We call it Stitcher. You had to restitch all the parts onto the thing. And so
Crazy
you come in some
complicated.
days and
Really
40% of the bomb is gone. What happened?
Yep.
Well, somebody cut and pasted to move it over 2 feet instead of
Instead of
copy.
click and drag.
Instead of
Copy and paste. Yeah.
Yeah, copy and paste would have worked. Well, no, it wouldn't have. Still would have got new IDs. Drag.
Drag
Drag
it
would have
over,
been
yeah.
the key. And with that, it got out of control, and perception at upper management was like, we're spending too much time trying to redo this. And
So back to the guy from Hunter. You're talking about Peyton.
yes,
Peyton, one of
my
the smartest guys I've ever been around in my life.
I would work for him in a heartbeat
McNully,
again.
great
and,
guy. Yep.
100%.
He'll be involved in the Tex in the City Huntsville for sure.
I was
going
gonna
to we need to
suggest
reach
it
out
for
to him
sure.
this week or next
Yeah.
week. Today's Friday, so remind me to do that.
I was
Darren.
gonna
we'll call him together. It'd be fun. Yeah, but he's brilliant.
Oh,
Brilliant
incredible.
guy. Yeah.
Incredible.
So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was that you are a developer. you don't want to
Yes.
be a manager or anything like that. And then you just talked about one of your managers who, like, you know, put $100 in your pocket if you can meet this challenge and things like that. Is that what motivates you? That thrill? Is it the money? I mean, obviously we're all motivated by money, but like, what motivates you as a developer?
I want to be paid well. You know, I mean, that's obvious. We all do. But honestly, and we laugh about this T-shirt here, this free T-shirt I got. It's great. Honestly, my wife bought me a T-shirt one Christmas years ago and said, "Oh, we'll work for free T-shirt," because I always said when we were at Moxie together, I was like, "Hey, you know, get me 5 Moxie shirts and I'll wear one every day."
That's
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
And that's the way I've always been at every job. When I worked at Microsoft, I had a Microsoft logo on every day because they would buy me shirts.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I would go order them and I wore them. You
A
know?
walking billboard.
I'm
Best
a
way to
walking
advertise.
billboard.
That's as guerrilla as it gets.
I'm a comfort maniac. I'm not going to work somewhere where I have to put on a suit and tie.
Yep.
And I'm, you know, blue jeans and a T-shirt's great with me. A sweatshirt and shorts would be even better.
Even better.
That's a whole other.
You know, part of what you're
Whole other
talking about too,
conversation.
Darren, I think you live it too and really buy into what we're doing because it's that community-oriented mindset, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, to
Absolutely.
put somebody's T-shirt on and wear it proudly with a logo on it, that's building a community, right? That's being part of
Absolutely.
that community. And you've done a
Absolutely.
great job at that for every place that I've started, for sure. So thank you for that.
No
It's
problem.
been awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else, any sort of like wisdom you'd like to share with younger developers or people who are like potentially getting into the space? Or
I read this on Twitter this morning. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it holds true. I've had so many. Well, let me back up 1 second.
yeah,
The biggest reason I think we don't get recognized for having a lot of tech talent in Birmingham is because some of our best tech talent moves on to be managers as soon as they can.
That's true.
As soon as they can. And I want to encourage people to stay in the tech game. It's a young man's game, but stay in the tech details. Don't abandon the coding.
why do you
and
think
don't
that
go
is
there.
though? Why is it? Are they chasing a bigger paycheck, more responsibility?
I think they get tired. It takes a lot of dedication to stay on the leading edge of technology. I remember when I would work with older people at the time when I was in my 30s. I'm coming along and I'm like, man, you've been doing this a long time. You should, you know, how are you not excited about this? And honestly, they're maintaining the same system for the last 10 years of their career. And I swore I would never end up at that spot. I had one of the nicest guys I ever met, one of the best tech minds I ever met, worked down at a large bank here in town. And he just existed.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you've done some great things in your life and always had some great old stories. But nowadays, he just didn't seem like he was thriving. And I'm like, man, I'm going to continue to thrive. I'll battle health issues, I'll battle whatever, but I'm going to stay on that leading edge. You know, once you start drinking from the fire hose, you got to keep guzzling.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't
Right.
stop.
Absolutely,
It's
because
fantastic.
especially nowadays, you stop, you know, for 5 minutes and you get behind,
You're way behind.
and you got to leapfrog and catch up, and yeah,
100%.
so,
But the tweet about it was, don't get bogged down in the code you're writing because it will decay. Code decays because the technology moves. If you're sitting there trying to make perfect code that you'll never have to touch again, it's a fool's errand.
You're doing
You'll
it
never
wrong.
do
That's
it.
right.
You'll never
Yeah.
do it. You're spending way too much time trying to make it better. Make it work. Make it right. Make it fast if there's an ROI there. But
progress,
be ready,
not
write it
perfection.
knowing that it's not the end.
Yeah,
Great advice.
yeah, I love
Excellent
it.
advice.
I love it. So, thank you, Darren, so much for joining us. I think this is kind of a good stopping point for this inaugural Techs in the City podcast. We do have a couple sponsors that we want to take a minute and thank. I think we've kind of mentioned most of them throughout, but definitely want to thank you, Chase, and Deploy Alloy for, you know, coming up with a lot of these concepts and stuff like that. Alloy Digital, Matt, and the team over there, TrueCoders as well.
Absolutely.
And Cindy Martin over at Birmingham Now.
One of my favorite people on the face of the earth.
No.
She's amazing.
She's
Yep.
amazing. And, you know, if you've been wondering where we've done this, we're actually doing this at Workplay. Workplace Theater. So thanks to Josh and Shane and Johnny and, all the crew over here for kind of getting some of this stuff set up for us.
They've been wonderful to work with and very accommodating and been fantastic. So.
Absolutely. So, Chase, any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to mention?
No, thank you both. Daniel, thank you for helping us put this on. You're a big part of this community in which we build. Darren, you're certainly a huge part of this community in which we're building, and I appreciate the support from both of y'all. And what I would ask everybody out there is just kind of lean into it, get involved in the community. Any way we can help, please reach out, and hope to see you on December the 10th here in Birmingham and January 14th in Huntsville.
Yep, absolutely. Looking forward to it, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Go build something awesome.
Thanks. That's right.